I'd like to call the August 9th, 2012 meeting of the Williamsburg City Council to order. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Knudsen?
Here.
Mr. Ponce?
Here.
Mayor Holman?
Here.
Vice Mayor Freiling?
Here.
Our colleague, Mr. Foster, is on a well-deserved vacation with his family before he starts hitting the books in the next couple of weeks, so we'll miss him today. First order of business today is council minutes from the meetings of July 2nd, the organizational meeting of July 2nd, the work session of July 9th, city council meeting of July 12th, and the special meeting of July 30th. Are there any additions or corrections?
Mr. Mayor, I move that City Council approve the minutes for the July 2nd, 2012 organizational meeting, the July 9th and July 12th, 2012 meetings, and the July 30th special meeting.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Knudsen?
Aye.
Mr. Ponce?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Okay. Our next order of business is public hearings. We have one today, and that's the revision of the official zoning maps, proposed ordinance 12-15. Carolyn.
Mayor Holman and members of council, what we have before you today is a changing in mapping from our CAD-based zoning maps, of which were approved in 2003, to the GIS-based maps. The current maps consist of 3 pages: the zoning map, the architectural review and archaeological map, and the Chesapeake Bay map. Since our ordinance change for the Chesapeake Bay regulations that requires site-specific recommendations, we propose removing the Chesapeake Bay map from the official zoning maps so that it may be updated as site-specific determinations are made. If it remains a part of the official zoning maps, it will require public hearings and approval by City Council with the changes. What you have here is our current existing zoning map. That's one of the 3 maps. This is our proposed zoning map done in GIS, and as you can see, the major changes is that the streets are not zoned anymore. Just the parcels are zoned. This is our existing architectural review and archaeological map, and as you can see on this map, sometimes it's hard to see the archaeological districts, like 1, and there's 3 down here and 2 up here. So we are proposing changing that map and splitting it up into 2 maps, one with just the architectural preservation districts, which is this map, and the 3rd map consisting of the archaeological map, which is this map. So I think it makes that map a lot clearer and a lot easier to read. The Chesapeake Bay map will still be a map, you just not will be a part of our proposal is not to be a part of the official zoning maps. So when staff goes out and we get determinations that change the Chesapeake Bay areas on the map, we can do that internally and keep the map up to date for people who need to look at that map for just in general purposes. We propose keeping the maps, and like I said, and making it 3 maps: the zoning map, the architectural review map, and the archaeological map. And I think that makes like I said, the archaeological map easier to read. Planning Commission held a public hearing last month and recommended approval of the attached ordinance for the zoning map change to GIS. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you, Carolyn. Are there any questions for Carolyn at this point?
I have one.
Okay.
Ms. Murphy, is there any disadvantage to removing the Chesapeake Preservation District map from the official maps?
No, I don't think there's any. If anything, it's probably an advantage because staff can then keep the map up to date. The Chesapeake Bay regulations do not require that it be a part of the official zoning map, and as of when we had our last update, they did recommend that we may want to take that away from the zoning map so that we can keep it updated at all time and put it on the web in a today format, rather than having to go through a 90-day process of having to go through a Planning Commission public hearing and a City Council public hearing and approval by City Council every time we go out and make a delineation that changes what you see on the map there.
So based upon your comments, this map will regularly be available on the city website and for the most part always up to date.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I have a question. Carolyn, are there any staff implications? I mean, GIS is different from CAD, right? Is it different?
It's different. Just about all of our mapping in the city now is GIS format, so we proposed changing it to make it easier, because now we don't have to keep two different databases. So we'll go to the GIS and we won't be in CAD anymore. And that's why it's taken a long time to get the maps up to date and in this format, because I had to actually go through all the parcels in the city, zone them correctly, look at them, compare them to the existing zoning map, and make sure everything was the same. So I think it's easier now. It's a matter of now, if a parcel gets rezoned, going in there, typing in from that zone to this zone, and it changes the color and updates the map automatically that quickly without having to go in and draw new lines and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. If not, then I'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishes to make any comments on the zoning map changes? Not seeing any, I'll close the public hearing and come back to council for discussion and action.
Just a point, we've come a long way from having to use highlighters to color in the map, which wasn't too long ago. Within 10 years, it seems like only yesterday that we approved the GIS, but I think this makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move that City Council revise the official zoning maps as detailed in proposed ordinance 12-15.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Knutson?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Our next order of business is matters of special privilege, and we have two. These are dealing with the biennial goals, initiatives, and outcomes. The first is the overview of the 2013-14 City Council goal setting process, and also a possibility for public comment at this time.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. What you see on the screen is, it's hard to see here, but it's very easy to see if you go online and under biennial goals and initiatives, and there are links to that at several points. There's a page which will indicate the process, when all the meetings will occur, as well as it allows you to click on and get all the background reports, the prior set of goals, the National Citizen Survey results, and as time goes on and more documents are prepared over the next couple of months, those will be added to the page. And importantly, there you can click on either council@williamsburgva.gov or communication at williamsburgva.gov to make a comment at any point, and then of course those will all be recorded as we go through the process. So just want to let everyone know that's up and available on the website now. And the next big thing to happen, in addition to the comment opportunities at the council meeting both today and next month, is we have a meeting scheduled for September 20 to do a work session in the evening dedicated to developing the goals, and that of course will be interactive with the citizens that attend that meeting, and we'd like as many people to come to that as are able, and which is a very important meeting in this process. So that's all I wanted to say at this point on process, and answer any questions you might have.
Any questions?
No, sir.
Will we have something ready for the neighborhood council meeting in September that we can take to them on this, and on the September meeting as well?
The September meeting of the neighborhood council, there will not be at that point a draft goals or initiatives, but we'll be in the stage of being able to let them know what's going to happen at that September 20 meeting and invite them to that, and then again introduce them to the resources that are already available now to start the process.
Great. And we'll use all our social media and other communication efforts to make sure people are aware of the process.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Next is the 2011-2012 Biennial Goals, Initiative, and Outcomes Final Assessment.
Yes, sir. What I'd like to do is, we developed a report. This was used 2 years ago, but we didn't particularly highlight it at that time, but I think it is a useful tool to give, just as it says, a quick look at what has been accomplished and the status of of various initiatives, the outcome measures, the citizen survey results, as they relate to the last set of goals. So I'd like to walk through this, point out a couple of highlights, any comments, questions that you have, or things you think should be pointed out. We can stop along the way and do that. The report looks at the GIOs in the three columns. The initiatives are the projects and the particular activities undertaken in order to accomplish each of the 10 major goals. The key outcome measures are the metrics that we've developed and are tracking to determine how well we're progressing towards accomplishment of that big goal. And then the citizen survey results broken down by the goal that they address. So, and you can see the color coding. The blue, the green, and the yellow means something slightly different in each category, but blue generally is the best. Green is either on track, on progress, or results are consistent or similar to the national benchmark. Yellow jumps out at you where you see that, because that says that's an area that's either declining as an outcome measure, below the benchmark, or behind schedule, and obviously not yet started would mean a goal that we've done nothing with at all. We don't have any of those. So, taking a look at our first goal, and 2 years ago, Council made community engagement its #1 listed goal. Not that the goals are in priority order, but I think it was still significant that you all chose to do that. And it's all about what are we doing to improve the partnership between local government and the citizens in order to accomplish the greater purposes for the community. There are a number of initiatives which are addressed in this area. I guess I should point out a number of the initiatives can go under more than one goal, but you pick the one that they're most closely aligned with and show it there. And looking at this, the city did, under initiatives, took some leadership in the region in developing that process of interjurisdictional coordination of comprehensive plans. And while that phase is pretty well done, we're still in the comprehensive plan development. So I've shown that as green for on schedule. And another one that I'd highlight would be under city, college, or town-gown relations, the work of the Neighborhood Relations Council, the good results that our police department has reported in terms of the issues of behavior and those kinds of activities in neighborhoods close to the college. We're showing good progress in that, and I think we all sense we're ahead of where we were 2 years ago. The Stryker Center project still has a long way to go, but the goal over the past 2 years was to develop the concept and put ourselves in a position then to go ahead with detailed planning and ultimately accomplishment of that. Under citizen communication and strategic plan, most of the outcome measures address that, and we've seen some significant results in that area. We set as a goal a 5% increase in website visits, and in fact, the increase over the last year was 21%. So we're building year after year with more activity, not only just visits to the website, but the next one, and that is people doing business with the city or online transactions, and those have continued to increase at a rate well above the targets set here.
Mr. Tuttle, can
Yes,
I
sir.
interrupt for just 1 second? Is it fair to say that although you can read these across, the second column does not necessarily directly relate to the item that precedes it in the first column?
Yeah, in fact, you should not read them across. They are 3 distinct columns, and all the columns go up to the major goal, but they're not designed to read across. That's a good point. Thank you. I'd add under e-Notify, we are now up to 3,412 citizens who receive e-Notify messages of what's going on in the city, and that's a significant increase. And under social media, as a tool for public information, Kate now is tracking over 2,400 Facebook friends and 1,200 Twitter accounts signed up to receive our messages. And so we've seen, again, great strides in that area. And we also see under the citizen survey results, the ones that apply in this area show very strong results, rating good or excellent, well above the national benchmarks. And particularly in public information services, at 84% rating, that was among the highest of any city or county in the National Citizen Survey. Going on to character of the city, always an extremely important goal as we seek to protect and enhance the unique character of Williamsburg. All of the initiatives are listed not as done, but as continuing because of the nature of them. There were 3 areas of the city where there was particular focus over the last 2 years in defining vision and casting the future, and that work goes on. We'll see in all of those areas that you see A, B, and C, we'll move into the comprehensive plan, and there'll be more definitive information coming out of the work that's been done over the past 2 years, such as the focus group on the Northeast Triangle and the Southeast Quadrant. That's the quarter path at Williamsburg area and the work that progresses there. I'd highlight that under corridor beautification, we have done well in terms of getting revenue sharing money to do corridor beautification projects, and we'll soon have another underground wiring project underway on Page Street. We unfortunately did not receive the grant we were seeking on the 60 East 3-jurisdiction project to beautify that corridor, but we're going to keep trying to find a way to do that. Open space preservation, we purchased several properties recently in the watershed, continuing to add to our watershed holdings, and completed the heritage tree program. So I think we can say we have made good progress in all the initiatives identified under character of the city. Under key outcome measures, frankly, this is a harder category to develop metrics on when you're talking about the qualitative nature of it. But what we have picked out are showing the progress that we've sought. Under citizen survey results, probably a better measure in this area. What is the opinion of our citizens about the key factors of quality of life as a place to live, overall appearance, cleanliness, and so forth? And in every case, those are above the national benchmark. So I feel like in this area, once again, the last 2 years has been a year of good progress. Our third goal area is economic vitality. I suppose we probably put as much emphasis in this as any of them because of as we all know, we swim upstream in terms of the national economy and the challenges that inevitably brings. But we have our overall goal, again, to increasing employment, increasing the success of city businesses. Also, it's the key to city revenue long term, and the focus is on by attending to our key drivers: heritage tourism, education, and development and redevelopment of what's out there now. So you'll see many strategies and approaches to addressing this. Of late, we've made some pretty significant progress in the area of tourism marketing and the restructuring and of the DMO, Destination Marketing Organization. We put a lot of effort in that item H, which is the Arts and Creative Economy District, and successfully created that district. That's why that one gets a blue one from me, even though we're not done there, but I think that was a significant achievement that ought to be rewarded with a completion blue. But most of them, we have to say honestly, are works in progress, and we're continuing on. Should remark too under this, our Economic Development Authority, the EDA, and our Economic Development Director, Michelle, have a lot going on and have a lot to show for their work. This is also an area, unlike the one we just talked about, where there are many metrics we can look at to assess our progress. And what we see there is a mixed result. Under the first, I'm showing the first two, the room nights and the Colonial Williamsburg ticket sales and visitor gate count as green for consistent, but in both cases we're below where we would like to be, and particularly below the room night goal set by the hospitality industry itself. We're at last year 631,000 room nights as opposed to 900,000, so we have a long way to go in order to get to that standard. And where Colonial Williamsburg's ticket sales and visitor count has turned up very slightly in the last year from the prior year, it can best be called at this point level, and certainly down from what it was 4 and 5 years ago. We have seen increases in excess of 2% in our meal tax, and also we've seen an increase in the number of new businesses and startup businesses in the city. So those are the two blues. Then under per capita retail sales growing annually, we are getting a little bit of growth there, but it's closer to level than anything else, and that's so we'd like to see more progress there. Our land book, commercial land book values are down, so you see the yellow there, and the one at the bottom. Also, the number of total jobs in the city continues to decline. We're now at 13,772 at the end of the last year. So, and whereas our per capita income stays pretty much level. So again, this is an area with lots of good measures, and I'd have to just to say the results have been mixed. Could be worse, could be better. Citizen survey results, again, are applicable. There are many that as you can see there, that deal with economic development, and again, most are above the national benchmark. Goal number 4, housing in neighborhoods. This is about enhancing the quality of life in city neighborhoods and also encouraging affordable housing. Again, I think the report card is a mixed result. Notably, neighborhood relations, preservation near the college. I think we've seen some good signs there. And the one at the bottom, the City and Housing Authority Partnership, there's good progress being made on that as well. However, we did not get the grant for the blatant elderly housing expansion as we had hoped from HUD, and that's going to be more and more challenging simply as federal funds become less funds for these types of activities, and what will the future will hold on that, we don't know, but we're going to try it again. We've certainly made some progress with the focus of both the Codes Compliance Department and the police in the Merrimack Trail neighborhoods, and you'll see that one again over in public safety. So, but incentives for workforce housing, again, steady progress there, not a major change. Under key outcome measures, some of those that are important. The third one down, overall residential assessed values increasing by 2% a year. That has not been the case. They've been falling. So we have not met that standard. And we've also seen a few more neighborhoods go into the above the 50% on rentals, where we would like to see that going in the no more than 3, and right now I believe the number is 5 or 6. I'll have to go back and check that. Bright spot, the neighborhood response teams are doing really very well, and hats off to both the Human Services Department and the Fire Department for the work they're doing in that area. Results on National Citizen Survey, again, when it comes to housing, are mixed, particularly the perception of our residents, and I think we would agree with them, is that the availability of affordable housing and variety of housing options are below national benchmarks. But sense of community actually exceeds the national benchmark at 71%, saying good or excellent. Transportation. Some of the positive things you see here is all the results under the National Citizen Survey, except perhaps for the last one, which is even on the amount of public parking, are positive. That's a good thing. Particularly some of those, such as the ease of walking in Williamsburg, is particularly high at 80%. And so that's some good indications. Also, the ridership both on Williamsburg area transport and on Amtrak continues to climb at a pretty good rate, and so we're seeing that. We haven't added a great deal in terms of bikeway expansion, but we are maintaining everything we've got and continuing to develop according to the master plan. When road work is being done, additional bikeways and shared ways according to the plan. And our accidents and with injuries stand at 72 last year, which is near level. So again, we're not getting quite to the state of reduction we would like to see there, but neither is it growing significantly. Initiatives, there are many in this area. A few I'd point out. The roads we're building in the city right now mostly are quarter path at Williamsburg. Those improvements under the Community Development Authority there. Unlike Arnbound Road, we have that in the plan, but VDOT funding has shrunk dramatically over the last several years, so it's going to take many years, no doubt, before we have the funding to do that relatively minus widening project from Trayburn Drive to Richmond Road and the intersection redesigns in between. We have traffic safety enhancements. The reason I show that is yellow is we have 3 signals that are in our plan to put in at various locations in the city. None of the 3 meet warrants, and we're not getting yet the type of development activity around those locations that will cause enough trips in order to meet the warrants. And so those are, we know the locations. They're at Quarter Path and 60, Parkway Drive and 2nd Street, and Richmond Road at Waltz Farm Drive. So those are the 3 next spots once they meet warrants. I also gave a yellow score to passenger rail enhancements because 2 years ago we thought there was a very good chance we could get another train a day, and that has not materialized and does not look like it is at all likely. That was part of how the trains are turned around to send them back up the northeast corridor, but it doesn't look like they're going to be coming down the peninsula. So I gave that a declining score. And we haven't done much yet with the vision for the transportation center expansion. That concept is simply to lay out a long-term vision for the day when we see rail take truly the next level and what Williamsburg can be as a transportation hub if we've got a long-range vision for what can happen with our transportation center. And that's an important goal that needs to be in next year's plan, but not much has been done with it yet. Public safety, a lot of blue, a lot of green, good progress in this area, particularly on the outcome measures. You'll see the response times. We are meeting those response times, and those are fairly strenuous, but difficult goals to meet, and both police and fire are working hard to do that. And we continue to clear Part 1 crimes at a rate faster than the national average. All of the indicators from the citizen survey are above national benchmark, and this is an area where citizens generally like their fire and police across the country, but people in Williamsburg like them even more. I don't know what else to say. And a number of initiatives, and again, either completed or making good progress. In education and human services, the one thing we can call completed, and it was a major effort, and that was the new contract for the joint school system with James City County, which was completed. The other activities are all ongoing, but excellent work done, particularly in youth achievement and senior support services in the Human Services Department. And some of the metrics you see there are and I think we're going to work on this area to even get better outcome measures. We're still looking to get more precise measures on the achievement of city students as opposed to students generally in the system, and I think we're getting close working with the superintendent and the folks over at the Williamsburg James City County school system. mixed scores, but more above the national benchmark, and a few level with it in terms of citizen perception in this area, but also some very high scores. Educational opportunity at 85%, noting good and excellent public schools, 83%. Those are high scores nationally. We all have a part in that. Recreation culture, lots of initiatives in this area. Most of them are facilities improvements in parks and in athletic facilities, and we are either on target or completed those projects. And then some of them, and the ones that are in yellow, that they're not, these are things that require partnerships with other players, and they have not moved at the pace that we would like to see in terms of completing an arrangement on the country road between Williamsburg and Mounts Bay. Again, with the county, James City County and Colonial Williamsburg and the city still have not found the magic to make that happen. The good news is nothing is going to stop that from happening in the future. The land is there and the players are there, but it needs to occur. We haven't done much yet with city historic items curation. This is the idea of building enough stuff so that we have a city museum someday. And this is one that can take more attention. I don't think we'll see anything further on the Poet Laureate designation. That really was an idea that came to us from some poets in the area, but we were never able to find the right formula in terms of how you make that designation, and so there it sits. And I can't see the bottom one.
Visual arts.
The visual arts, yeah. That also is a pending project working with the 20th Century Gallery.
Could you
21st century
talk just a moment about Friends of the Parks?
Yeah, that's developing a cadre of citizens who come together and to work as volunteers in the parks in a more formalized way. We have lots of people that work in part-time positions in the parks and volunteers, but now it's taking it and having a formal structure for that. So Laurie has been working on that with her team, and again, that's all about getting more people engaged in parks and recreation as volunteers.
That's one of the ideas that came out of the public meeting last time, I think, and Laurie picked up and has been working on that. Although I think it takes some time and effort to sort of make sure it's put together right, so that you, because sometimes using volunteers can take a lot of effort.
Sure, but it may also be an example of the type of item that could use a little more public exposure to make people aware of the opportunities.
And yeah, I think that's right. It hasn't been brought up to your level yet, and those steps ought to be taken. Outcome measures, a couple things to highlight there. We're now up to 18 different tournaments that the city is engaged with, and we had over 8,600 participants in various tournaments over the last year. So that's one that I think that we've shown great progress on. The last two, the farmers market, again, is one of those City of Williamsburg home runs. We wanted sales of at least $750,000. Last year we had $979,000 in sales, and so we're just under $1 million in sales at the farmers market, which is pretty amazing. And we've continued to see increased attendance at Festival Williamsburg at over 2,800 last year. Citizen survey results, again, high, the positive, and mostly above the national benchmark in those areas, with the library leading the way at 94% good or excellent. So we take credit for the library's good work. Environmental sustainability, again, many initiatives in this area, some which can properly be said to have been completed, such as the Southeast Water Tank Project. But most of these are ongoing efforts that the staff works very hard at and will continue. Some of the metrics that are more interesting here, the recycling, we said the goal was to be at 150% of Virginia's goal, and we're right now just shy of that at 145%. However, it's been an improving indicator, so it got a blue mark. And much the same with drinking water consumption. Our goal is to be below 165 gallons per day per account, and we're at 166 right now, but that's also been improving. So I think that our residents are continuing to show good progress in conserving water. The increase of the residential recycling rate annually, right now we're at 43%, so we've shown growth in that over the last 2 years. Citizen survey results, again, in all of the environmental areas are very positive, both in terms just in the raw number and also compared with other communities. And finally, the last goal is city organizational leadership. And the one that I think we could give ourselves a gold star for completing, although it's truly never done, and that is the budget reset. Because of the decisions made last year, both on the revenue side, also the structure we have in place now with the next 5-year school contract, what was done on health care, even with all those cost pressures, I think that puts us in a better position going forward. And so I feel pretty good about what the city has accomplished in that area. The other 4 are all very important and ongoing activities as we continue to work on building the strength of the city organization. Some of the outcome measures that are particularly useful. The second one, operating revenues exceeding expenditures each year. We have done that, and with excess of $1 million plus of annual surplus, and exceeding the city's 35% operating reserve policy. We're right now at 54%. Annual employee turnover rate of 10% or less. Last year we were at 5%, unusually low. I don't expect it to stay that low going forward, but we've had very low turnover in the last several years. And another one that we failed to accomplish, reduce the increase in health insurance claims paid to less than 5%. I wish it were so. We are a long way from that in the last few years, and but we certainly have not given up, and we need to continue to watch that and do our best to achieve it. And that, of course, relates back to item E under initiatives, employee wellness and medical cost containment. Finally, citizen survey results in city organization areas is very positive. Knowledge of city employees' responsiveness, courtesy, overall impression, and just the general impression of services provided by the cities. You see those numbers. So that's our report card, and happy to answer any questions.
Let me come back to council for any comments, questions, discussions, and then we'll see if there are any public.
Sure. I have a question for Mr. Tuttle. And if you explained it at the beginning and I missed it, please forgive me, but the red that we don't see present on the sheet anywhere, would that red only be used under initiatives?
Yes. The idea there is if we said we were going to do something and we just haven't done anything at all with it and not started it, you would get a red, which would be not a good thing.
Have we thought about incorporating it into the key outcome measures or the citizen survey results? Although based on past surveys, I don't know that we would need it in the survey results, but the outcome measures could change significantly from year to year. And just even though we might be doing something on an initiative, if the outcome measure is falling very far short of our desired goal, the question would come up, are we doing the right things or are we doing enough?
Well, you could create a category. If we have one that the yellow says declining, you could get something worse than declining,
Plummeting,
which is
plummeting,
or so far below your target that you need to mark it out as a red, literally a red flag. So, yeah, let's take a look at that.
I just offer to think about that because it gives us a way of distinguishing between the yellows. There's some that might be declining,
Yes.
but it might be just very slightly, and then there are others that could be causes for concern that we really need to pay some.
Yeah, I think we
close
could bring more
attention to.
precision to that. That's a good suggestion.
Thank you. That's it.
No question. I guess just a comment from my observation. It would seem that I think what I get from this is that we're doing a good job in the business of being at the city. What we provide our residents and how we respond to things. When you look at public safety and recreation, lots of things are happening and we're meeting those goals. And I think that's a positive sign, one that all of our residents really should take pride in. Things where maybe, for example, commercial values, declining. That's almost out of our control to a certain degree. So I think where we're showing some greens or yellows, it's not all that. There's things that are well out of our control entirely. So I think for the most part, I like what I see.
But along those lines, what's probably most impressive about this is that any entity, organization, institution is probably going to be its own most harsh critic. So as we look at things that are going forward, we know so much about what can happen and what we'd like to see happen that it's disappointing when it doesn't all fall into place exactly. What's really helpful here are the citizen survey results, where we're getting that third-party objective evaluation based upon a fair comparison to communities across the country. And when you look at that third column, the number of blues is simply remarkable. And we only have, 2 yellows in the whole column? So, I just think that's another indicator that the work that city staff is doing is just incredibly valuable to the community and very effective. Sorry for jumping in there.
Thank you.
I can just agree with what everybody said. I do wonder if there's a time when you want to take something off of this list, like the poet laureate, for example.
Oh, yes. Well, you'll get a chance to do that.
If I'm lucky.
Yes.
Well, the governor has appointed.
This list, after today, goes into history, and now we're all about the business of developing the next list.
Okay.
And that will start with a city council retreat on the 25th, and then through the various meetings in September, the public meeting in September, and then meetings in October before adoption in November. So, we need to, and I think Doug's point is particularly important, is that as we look at these, we need to think about what do we control and what do we not control, and in part thinking about sort of some of these measures in terms of, if you're measuring something that's completely out of your control, what does that tell? It tells you what's happening, but it doesn't tell you anything about what you should do. And so in part, we may want to think more critically about some of these metrics of what do we want sort of several categories of metrics, those metrics that we can do something about, and those metrics that tell us what's happening to us, even if we can't do something about it.
I would add, the same can be true of initiatives. We put a few in here that were depended much more on someone else, such as the Amtrak thing, than anything the city could do. But the majority of them, and indeed the emphasis, is on the things we do have control over. And that's an excellent point.
Any further comment? Jack, thank you, and thank the staff for all of this is a summary of a lot of work, and we really appreciate all you've done here.
If I could just add, there's also a 56-page report that goes with it that has a lot more detail in it.
And we appreciate you not going over that in detail with us today as well. Is there any public comment following this? Anybody wish to add any further discussions? And again, as I said, we'll have opportunity for public input at future meetings as well as the public meeting. Before we go to our next order of business, which is reports, we have a visitor today, and I'd like to recognize that visitor. This is Jumani Williams, who's a city councilman from representing the 45th District in New York. Would you stand up, please? We appreciate you coming to visit, and I hope if you're willing to stick around after, we'd like to talk with you and get your impression of what we do and don't do. But thank you very much for being here. We really do appreciate it. Our next order of business is reports, and we have three. The first is the monthly financial statements. Jack, anything in particular? This is the first report of the new fiscal year. So,
Just to point out, on page 1, for instance, under FEMA reimbursement, you see $137,000 in there. That's going to be accrued back into the prior year. The same type of thing, there's a major expense of $194,000 on page 2 under non-departmental. That's the Anthem year-end payout. That's also going to be accrued back. So with all of that activity taking place, this report is limited in terms of its bottom line usefulness.
any questions for Jack?
Maybe a question. I guess on the bottom of page, your finance, page 6, we put in there the state LGIP interest rates and compare it to last year. Could we do the same with the insured cash sweep account just to see what the interest rates are and how they move? Just add a line down there to show what the interest rates are?
I don't see why we couldn't. Bill, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. I will tell you, the insured cash sweep account is the account we have at the Virginia Company Bank. We opened that account last year, $14 million balance. It started earning 75 basis points, which is 0.75% annualized. When we had the agreement drawn up, they can change that at any one point in time, and that's part of the way rates are figured. They only reduced it down to 70 basis points in that whole time, and it stayed at 70 almost the entire full past year.
Okay.
So, but if it can move, it's totally liquid, though.
So would it be okay, or can I get you to add that line?
I'll add a line at the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize that they had lowered it. And I knew it wasn't fixed, but
I'm surprised it's only gone down a little bit in a year, so it's been a good move.
I don't know that it's there. You might also add the interest we're earning on the CDs. So that somebody looking at this could see sort of, what all those accounts are earning, because I don't think that's on there right now.
It's not on there. It's buried in one of the metrics that we have in the monthly report. It's got an average earnings.
But it might be useful, because then somebody could look at each of the categories and see see what we're earning on those. Okay, thanks. Any other comments? Next are monthly department operating reports. Anything in particular, Jack?
I'd like to call on Parks and Recreation Director Lori Ryerson to make an introduction.
This is Michael Van Aldenhout. He is our new Waldo Park manager. He started at the end of June, and prior to that, he worked for us 4 years as a park attendant at Waldo. So we're happy to have him on board.
Welcome, and thank you for being here today.
I'd also add that he's a William & Mary graduate, so we're happy to keep William & Mary grad in town.
Yeah, good, great. Well, thank you, and you've already been part of the family, but welcome to the family in another role. So thank you. Okay. Schedule of meetings.
Can we go back to operating reports?
Yes.
I did have a question on the monthly departmental operating reports. This is under the fire department for Chief Dent. We have a 57% increase in false alarm responses, and it's not even final exams at William & Mary.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, it was easy to go back and look at the two major factors. Unfortunately, one of them is William & Mary during the summer. They do a lot of construction and a lot of cleaning in the buildings, which increases the number of false alarms. The good thing about that is the college has a strategic initiative in place. They want to reduce the number of times that we're responding on campus for false alarms. So when this occurs, I work closely with their safety department. Sometimes the contractors don't do exactly what they're supposed to do when they're in the buildings. So they really go out and visit those contractors and make sure they're adhering to procedures to try to bring that number down. The other number that increases the number of thunderstorms that we've had that caused power surges or power outages, especially the storm from 2 weeks ago Tuesday. That caused a significant power outage in the city. At one time, we had 3,900 customers without power, and most of the street lights were out. So we ran on numerous calls, alarm activations. Obviously, we can't change our response algorithm during those, even though a lot of times we're assured they're related to the storm. They could also be a lightning strike, which we need to go there and investigate. So that was the reason for the increase in this month. So one of the things is beyond our control. The other, we work very closely with the college to try to bring that number down.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Chief, before you go, would you like to give council an update on your new piece of equipment?
Yes, sir. Our aerial platform arrived last Monday, a week ago Monday, in Richmond to the Chester facility that they take all of the new apparatus that comes to Virginia there. They do some of the final maintenance to it, mount equipment before it's delivered to the locality. It came in on Monday. I went up Tuesday morning and looked at it and actually took a ride in the bucket. It's a beautiful piece of equipment. Cracked the windshield on the way down from a rock flying up and hitting the windshield on one side, so they're replacing the windshield. Got a few other touch-ups to do to it. It's still probably going to be a couple weeks before we actually take delivery of it, and then we have some scheduled training, driver training, and operator training that will come from the manufacturer that comes with delivery of the apparatus that all 3 shifts will go through before we actually place it in service. And we also did secure the sale of our current truck. That'll be taken care of. As soon as we put the new one in service, they'll be ready to take delivery of our current truck 10.
Great. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on department operating reports? If not, schedule of meetings, Jack.
Nothing in particular to point out.
Brings us to city manager reports, which we have 3. The first is energy and cost for the municipal building.
Dan Clayton will start on this report.
Mayor, members of the council, by way of introduction, I'm going to give you some background information about the building. Started construction on the new addition in November of 2009, and the completed construction in August of 2011. That was the addition and the renovation of the existing building. And as you can see in between there was a lot of folks moving around. We built the new addition, and city manager's office and whatnot went down to the new addition. We also, during that period, moved downstairs when they came back and started doing the renovation on the existing building. We moved downstairs to the housing authority. When I say we, the public works department, moved downstairs to the housing authority. So there was a lot of moving around and stuff. And we finally got everything back up and running. We were all in the right place in the August time frame of 2011, and our mechanical system up and operating properly in the October time frame. The municipal building, the original building is 22,900 square feet. The addition was 16,500. So we have a total now square footage on that building of 39,000. I'm going to have Tom Leach. He's our building facilities manager, come up now and review all the facts and figures on the energy used. Tom came to us in March of 2010, so right in the middle of all this stuff. And took over the project management last summer. So he's been on here on the final phases and doing all the closeout and all the nitty-gritty work on making the contractor come back for this and that. So but he survived all that, and he's with us today. So have Tom come up. Tom Leach.
Tom, welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Tom Leach. I'm the building facility manager for the city of Williamsburg. First, I'd like to show you the geothermal system and the basic function of how it operates. It absorbs thermal energy through its systems, mechanical and chemical operation, and transfer that thermal energy to the well system in our well field. We have approximately 96, we have exactly 96 geothermal wells associated with this system. Other energy saving strategies we've used in this building were in the building envelope, R30 insulation was used in the roof system. R21 insulation used in the exterior walls and high-performance window systems were also used. In the HVAC system, we use direct digital controls, which is a sophisticated computer control system used for monitoring, managing, and scheduling the operation of the HVAC system. We have 2 energy recovery units. They're used for capturing and reusing thermal energy in the building's exhaust. We have automated motion sensor in all of our lighting systems and solar tube lights, skylights installed to maximize natural light in the building. And the building, municipal building, uses all Energy Star equipment, and that includes the HVAC systems themselves. I'd like to point out that the blue columns were pre-construction numbers, and the green columns are post-construction. This shows us the use of kilowatt hours per month. Pre-construction, we're using on average 79,225 kilowatt hours per month. Post-construction, that's down to 55,647, an average savings of 23,578. Kilowatts per square foot is 3.45. And pre-construction and post-construction kilowatt use or square foot was 1.41, an average savings of 2.04 kilowatts per square foot. Cost per square foot is pre-construction was 27 cents, and post-construction is 12 cents, an average saving of 15 cents per square foot. Energy cost per month, our utility bills were $6,144 on average, and a pre-construction and post-construction average is $4,661. An average saving is of $1,483 a month. This chart shows a comparison of the pre-construction technology. Conventional would probably really be pre-construction technology would be a better term versus what we installed, the green design. Prior to the renovation, our annual bill for utility was $73,735. Expanding that number for the additional footage on top as the purple, we would have expected to pay an additional $53,000 for a total of $126,926 per month. Our actual post-construction annual cost is $55,939, which gives us an annual savings of about $70,000 new construction versus pre-construction. That's all I have. Any questions, sir?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll come back to council for any questions, comments.
I have one question. If you don't have the information, that's fine. I just think it'd be something interesting to know. And that is based upon that $70-some thousand a year savings based upon the projection of the previous technology compared to the new technology. How does that compare to over whatever appropriate time period, 5, 10, 20 years, the cost of implementing that technology in the building? And do we end up coming out ahead? Do we end up losing a little bit? Do we know?
It depends on where you use the technology at. And what we do know about thermal energy is that they're the most effective and cost-effective on large facilities that are stable in their operation. So municipal building was a good choice to use it in. If you put it in a building where there's a lot of change in temperature, or a smaller building, the return on investment is not as great. So you really got to check where it's going to be implemented. I think the cost of operation is probably a more important number. You want to know how much is it going to cost to maintain a system is pretty important.
Well, obviously, the savings are striking, but one of the things that jumped out at me on your last slide was it's less expensive to heat, or the energy cost is less expensive than it was with a smaller building. So, there's real savings there, even when you take out the extrapolation that you made for the pre-construction side. So, good for us.
A very smart city council.
Could have done it without us.
I don't have any questions, just thank you, because I've been wondering about it and asking about it, and it's really nice to have the numbers. So.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
That's really helpful. So thank you very much. I know a lot of work went into that, and we really do appreciate that.
Dan, do you have some wrap-up remarks, or are you done? Okay. If I could just add, we didn't attempt to do a return on investment because of the complexity of an add-on project as opposed to a new construction. And I did want to emphasize that this was a good project for it, but not on every project. All those other energy savings activities just about always make sense, but whether geothermal makes sense really needs to be looked at very hard on a project-by-project basis. And this one, I think it did, but even then, when you look at how much it costs to go that route versus the savings we're getting out of it, we could go further with the return on investment, but this is the rosy picture to show you just what you're saving, but it doesn't really take into the cost of all those other things, and we have a little difficult time parsing all that out, so we left it as you saw it.
Because the geothermal system, I mean, that's expensive.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say.
But in 100 years.
Okay,
the right thing to
thank you. Yeah, well,
Eco-friendly, I think.
yes, it is.
Yeah, it is.
It is green. Now, have we gotten a LEED designation for that building yet, or what?
The final determination has not come through. It takes a long time for all of that to happen, but that's in the architect's hands, working with the lead counsel. And the question, of course, is at what level it will come in. And I know we're close, but I don't know what we're going to get yet.
Great, thank you. And Dan, thank you, and thank Tom again for a very good presentation. That was helpful. Next report is update on aid to the Commonwealth.
I've been looking forward to this.
I have nothing but question marks on the agenda.
Good afternoon, Mayor Hallman and members of council. The Commonwealth of Virginia began reducing funding to localities for specific programs back in fiscal year 2009, as the state was experiencing the effects of the recession while balancing its budget. Like many localities, Williamsburg chose to send a check to the state each year for the entire amount of funding cuts, rather than have the funding for specific programs cut during the year. The city has reimbursed the state approximately $167,000 over the 4-year period from fiscal year 09 through 12. If you'll recall, a year ago, VML and VACO urged all localities to pass resolutions requesting the General Assembly to reverse the $60 million per year aid to locality reductions for fiscal year 12, and also encourage them to eliminate the same for fiscal years 13 and 14, the years of the current biennium. Council passed that resolution along with dozens of localities around the state. That effort must have had some impact as the governor's budget for the current fiscal year 13 did reduce the amount of the program cuts from $60 million statewide to $50 million for the current year, and then down to $45 million for next year. The localities were recently notified of their reductions for the current year. The net impact on the city is $42,003 for the current year, which is after taking into consideration reimbursements for the library and the group home commission, and also after reimbursing James City County for funding cuts affecting joint offices at the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, Clerk of the Circuit Court, and the Sheriff. The city's operating budget has a line item, aid to the Commonwealth. We have had that since 09. There's $45,000 budgeted for the current year, so the money is there. You have a memo that shows in more detail how the joint funding for the various programs affects the total the city ultimately pays. And we're recommending that the city again elect to reimburse the state this year as it has in the past for the entire amount, and checks are due to the state by January 7th.
Great. Thank you, Phil. Any questions, comments?
A couple of questions. for fiscal year 12, which is the year ending this past June 30, the state cut to localities funding was $50 million, and it'll be $45 million in 13?
It was $60 million last year. They dropped it down to $50 million for 13
Okay, and where's the $45 million come in?
next year.
14.
For 14?
For 14,
Okay.
yes.
And I seem to recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was a release that came out from the governor's office recently about maybe a state budget surplus?
Yes.
Anybody recall what that amount was?
State budgets, yes, the memo did come out. The state budget, it talked about the revenues coming in over budget for fiscal year 12 for the state, the year that just ended. I believe their year ends in May. On the revenue side alone, it was a $129 million surplus. They're tallying up the expenditure savings on the expenditure side, so it's going to be quite a bit higher again. For fiscal year 10, there was a $403 million surplus. Fiscal year 11 was $545 million surplus, so they'll be adding to those numbers. Granted, some of that money is going to be put into the state rainy day fund, but there's still quite a bit of surplus on the state's books after all is said and done, after the fiscal year 12 is closed out.
And I realize, I mean, we try to operate every year to surplus too, and we need to try to do that, and the state needs to try to do that, and I understand that. Where does the rest of the money go?
The rest of the money, the state money?
Yes.
All state programs they have.
I mean, if they have a surplus at the end of the year and they put a certain segment of it into the rainy day fund, does it go into an account or?
They can reappropriate the money and spend it. So
they could give it back to the localities?
They could do that, yes, sir.
Oh, could we suggest that?
Well, that's what we did last year with the resolution.
We should do that again. Thanks.
Yes. It's going to take a lot of effort with VML and VACO again, I believe.
But this is just useful because it helps to show the death by 1,000 cuts that we get from the, and none of them are big, but when you start adding them together, it's just, and the numbers total, both the number of areas and the dollars just add up. And again, it's back to your point with a surplus.
Indulge me just one more moment, because I think what gets lost in this whole conversation is we call it aid to the Commonwealth, they call it funding to localities. That's not what this is about. This is about delivering services and programs to the people who provide the funding that creates the state budget. And the state, and I don't want to be overly critical here or sound that way, but the state is collecting money. They have reasonable expenditures, and they make cuts along the way just like we have. But when they have a surplus and the cuts to the localities have put not necessarily Williamsburg, but other localities to potentially very precarious financial positions, it seems to me that there would be some willingness, interest, or maybe even feeling of responsibility in restoring some of that to help put the localities that make up the Commonwealth on more sound financial footing so that we can all succeed together, because that's what this is about. We need the people to succeed, we need the municipalities to succeed, and we need the entire state to succeed. But when we operate in a way that puts any one of those at an extreme disadvantage, we're setting ourselves up for potential failure, and that's the part that I cannot understand.
Well, and when you look at the list of where the cuts are, financial assistance to localities operating police departments, financial assistance for child and youth services, I mean, those are the kinds of things that they're cutting, and that makes it even worse. So I agree with you.
And again, I mean, we're fortunate that we have a budget situation where these items aren't going to make or break us, but that's not every locality in the state, and I think that's important to consider too.
I guess at the same time, I should express appreciation for them not growing those cuts. That there has been an effort to reduce them, because to make them more significant would be more difficult for us. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Have we told the state what we think?
I don't think I've told anybody, the audience at home.
Okay. Phil, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
We do have a recommended action.
Yes, we do. We do need to take action. I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor, I move that City Council direct the city manager to notify the State Department of Planning and Budget that Williamsburg elected to make a direct payment of aid to the Commonwealth in the amount of $42,003 in lieu of individual program funding reductions in fiscal year 2013.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Knutson?
Aye.
Mr. Pond?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland?
Aye.
Our final report under City Manager Reports is the Mutual Aid Fire Prevention Services and Hazardous Material Response Agreement with Joint Base Langley, Fort Eustis.
Chief Dent will give this report.
Mayor Hall and members of council, the city received a request from the Department of the Air Force to enter into a new mutual aid agreement between the city of Williamsburg and the Joint Base Langley Eustis, formerly known as just the Fort Eustis Army Base, for fire prevention services and hazardous materials responses by the fire departments of the respected parties. This agreement is essentially the same agreement executed with the Army in 2003 with a couple of exceptions. One exception is they added the hazardous materials response. The other exception is the main reason for this new agreement is due to the joining of the two bases between Fort Eustis and the Air Force, and the Air Force not being a party to the 2003 agreement. They would now be included in this new agreement. This mutual aid agreement is similar to the regional mutual aid agreement I brought before you last year, in that this obligates us in no way to respond. We take the request, and if we're able to respond, we make that decision at that time, but it no way obligates us to respond. And similar situation for Joint Base Langley Eustis. Incident command works similar to our localities we deal with now. Fort Eustis responds here, we fall into their incident command system. If we respond there, we fall into their incident command system. The only exception being if it's the crash of a military aircraft, then the fire chief or his or her designated representative from Joint Base Langley Eustis would assume command of that incident. As discussed last year when we passed the regional agreement, being one of the smaller localities with a limited number of equipment and apparatus, it's highly unlikely that we would be called upon to respond. Worst case scenario, we'd be dealing with the crash of the military aircraft, where we would interact with Joint Base Langley and Eustis. Also, we do have a couple of specialized pieces of equipment that could be called, which is our hazardous materials decontamination trailer, or we have a hazmat trailer that carries a certain amount of absorbent booms, pad, and sand to help with absorbing hazardous materials. We're fortunate in this region we more than likely wouldn't be called for that situation because in the Hampton Roads region we do have two regional hazmat teams available to us, one in Newport News and one in Chesapeake. I asked other members of the department who have been around Williamsburg much longer than I have, and no one can ever recall a response to Fort Eustis or Fort Eustis responding to Williamsburg. But it's there, and like I said, worst case scenario would be the crash of a military aircraft that might cause us to work together.
Great. Thank you.
I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thanks. Any questions?
No questions, no.
I mean, worst case scenario means we should be there to help, and so, and vice versa. I
Yeah,
mean, if it's that
absolutely.
bad, I think we ought to work together, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Fort Eustis, the fire chief does participate in our regional chiefs meeting, so all the localities have a great working relationship with their chief now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think we need an action here.
Mr. Mayor, I move that City Council adopt proposed Resolution 12-13, authorizing the city manager to execute the agreement for mutual aid for fire prevention services and hazardous materials response between the City of Williamsburg and Joint Base Langley Eustis.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please, Ms. Scott.
Ms. Knutson?
Aye.
Mr. Pond?
Aye.
Mayor Holman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland?
Aye.
Our final report is the city attorney report, and this is an update on all those things the General Assembly did that might influence us.
Well, certainly not everything that the General Assembly did.
A number of things.
If the numbers that I found online this morning are any indication, it's one small drop in the bucket. The numbers that I found were 2,875 bills were proposed and 846 bills were passed, and we're only going to talk about 35 of them. So it's a very small drop in the bucket, but these are the things that, in looking at it, we thought would either be of interest to council or things that council is certainly going to see again as we move forward in the next couple of months. All right, the first is personal property tax, House Bill 41, and this amends the state code to provide that the situs for personal property tax on a motor vehicle is where the domicile of the owner of that vehicle is, if a student is operating the car. So in other words, if there's a William and Mary student whose family lives in a jurisdiction in Northern Virginia and their parents own the car, the situs for the tax is Northern Virginia, not the city of Williamsburg, even though the car would be normally garaged in the city. House Bill 80 requires that the local tax assessing officer separately consider wetlands on someone's property if the property owner requests that they do so. So they would have to divide out the wetlands on the property and assess those differently. Presumably they would be worth less money than the rest of the property would be. The City Council also has the option to instruct the local tax assessor to do that without the request of a specific property owner. Senate Bill 55-1 regards real property taxes, and it allows the jurisdiction to discount real property tax payments due if they're paid in full on or before the due date. This is permissive, it's not mandatory. House Bill 185 adds Section 19.2, 340.1 to the state code. I know that you saw this, the results of this in your budget deliberations. This provides that the state police or state enforcing mechanism, if there's a choice between enforcing a local law and the state law, has to enforce the state law as opposed to the local law. And the effect of this is that the fines would be paid to the state and not to the locality. This does not affect local police departments. This is only the state entities that enforce the law. House Bill 933 and House Bill 190. Last year, Council adopted, because of a change in the state constitution, a tax exemption for disabled veterans who were suffering a 100% service-related disability, and this pertains to their residence where they primarily reside. There has been a lot of issues pertaining to that have come up in trying to enforce this and implement this across jurisdictions. And so these bills are designed to clarify various aspects of that, to provide when the tax rebate or refund actually applies. It either applies at the acquisition if the disability predates the acquisition, or it begins on the date of the acquisition. And it provides the state is supposed to promulgate rules and regulations to help with the implementation of this. There will be some amendments to the city code as a result of this, just to clarify the way that the city enforces this as well. Similarly, there was one change to tax deferment or exemptions for individuals who are elderly and disabled, and that is to allow localities to adopt income and financial worth limitations for qualification for the deferment or the exemption, as opposed to having a requirement that income is determined based on the income that's reported on tax returns, because not everyone falling into this category is actually going to report all their income or actually file a tax return. So you will also see a code provision to amend the city code to account for this as well. Localities now have the option of conditioning the issuance of business license on the individual with the business, owning the business, paying their delinquent real property taxes prior to that business license being issued. there was a change in cemetery law this year that now in the state code there is a process that permits the owners of a cemetery to go through a public notice requirement and declare interment rights that have not been used for the last 50 years to be abandoned, which could potentially be a helpful process for us with Cedar Grove. The one caveat to that is in the event that the city goes through all of that and is able to reallocate those spaces, the individuals who owned the property rights have 30 years to come back in and claim that property right again. So they wouldn't necessarily have to have the same plot, but they would have to be provided with a plot if they reestablish those rights. There were a couple of changes with respect to the Freedom of Information Act this year. One is that now there is an exemption for disclosure for the name, the physical addresses, the telephone numbers, and email addresses containing correspondence between individuals residing in the jurisdiction and members of the public body or school board, unless that correspondence relates to the transaction of public business. And I think I'm just not smart enough, but I don't quite understand the purpose for this, because FOIA only applies to documents that pertain to public business. And so this exemption is more of a clarification, because the things that they're talking about, if they are not in the transaction of public business, are not subject to FOIA disclosure anyway, but this clarifies that they're not subject to FOIA disclosure. There's also a new provision to FOIA regarding meetings that provides that a member of the governing body can attend a closed meeting held by a committee or subcommittee of that body or any entity performing delegated functions for that body, even when the particular member is not a member of the committee or the subcommittee. The member attending who is not part of that committee or subcommittee cannot participate in the meeting, and in the event that one of the members attends who is not a member of the committee or subcommittee, the minutes have to be taken sufficient to show the identity of the individuals attending. So you don't have to take actual minutes in the closed meeting, but you do have to record who was present.
Does the Housing and Redevelopment Authority, for example, would that fit under this?
I would read that too, yes.
So, or do we have any other committees or subcommittees or delegate?
Periodically, there are committees that council creates. There was school board committee, for example.
Okay.
Things like that. DHS Department of Human Services is now required to run annual credit checks for children who are 16 years of age or older who are in foster care to help avoid identity theft. And they're also required to develop policies and procedures regarding information to help prevent identity theft for those children. House Bill 375 now prohibits localities from adopting a workplace rule that prevents an employee from possessing at the workplace a lawfully possessed firearm as long as they store it in a locked private motor vehicle. We do have a provision in our personnel manual that prohibits employees from carrying firearms onto city property, so that will have to be amended. Now there is a process whereby the Board of Zoning Appeals can be asked to carry a question over if during the BZA meeting a tie vote is the result of an action of the BZA. So if you have someone who's absent or abstaining and there's a tie vote on the issue in question, the appellant can ask for that to be carried over to the next meeting. There were a couple of changes to proffers law this year. There is a new process for a landowner requesting amendments or variations to proffers that would come directly to the City Council. There's a limited notice provision in there, so landowners that are subject to the proffers are required to receive written notice. That doesn't mean notice can't be sent to additional people, but that's in terms of requirements. If the proffers deal with use and density, then there must be a public hearing, but if the proffers deal with anything else, council has the option to waive a public hearing. House Bill 571 allows council to use money that's provided through proffers to pay the cost. Sorry, I'm back up. I'm on one slide ahead. The deadline for performing conditions and proffers, cash payments for proffers or unreleased performance bonds, was extended several years ago as a result of the downturn in the real estate market to try to make it easier for developers to continue with their plans, even though they may not want to continue with their plans immediately. That was through this year, and so that has been extended through 2017. So, for example, cash proffers that were due as a result of plans anytime prior to January 1st, 2011 now don't have to be paid until July 1st, 2017. So it's a fairly extensive extension of this deadline. Site plans are generally valid for a period of 5 years. That's also been extended to July 1st of 2017, so long as the site plan was approved as of January 1st, 2011. So, for example, if someone had a site plan that was approved on January 1st, 2006, theoretically their site plan could continue as a valid site plan through July 1st, 2017, even if they haven't done what they needed to do to move forward on the project, if my math is correct. So that's a fairly significant extension. All right, this is the one that I thought we were on. This gives cash proffers can be used for alternative projects, and council can determine that cash proffers can be used for an alternative project if the original project is not possible to complete in a timely manner or the functional purpose no longer exists. So if the project changes and public infrastructure that's intended to be paid for through the use of a cash proffer is no longer necessary, council can decide to use that money for another project so long as the project is in the vicinity of the original project and is in the public interest.
So as an example, didn't we get a proffer on the 2nd Street stoplight that we talked about with the...
No, it didn't get that far.
It never got that. But if it had gone forward,
yeah,
and we never had the vehicle count to trigger the need for the stoplight, but the money was paid down the road, we could use that to put in a bike lane in the same area? I'm just using
As I read that, yes.
Okay. Sometimes it's helpful for me to just have an example.
The law regarding historic structures has changed, and this pertains to the demolition of historic structures. So right now we have a process whereby an application is made to City Council. Council decides whether or not they're going to allow the demolition, and then the property owner has a certain amount of time to market the property. And all of that's done as a result of council determining that there is a historic structure or a structure that is in need of preservation that has some historical value. We are now required to identify and inventory all those structures, to include those structures in a historic district, including establishing written criteria to be used in making that determination, to provide notice in a public hearing in order to make the designation, and only once we do this can we go through that same procedure. There is an exemption in that procedure if the building constitutes a hazard as determined by the building inspector. That process doesn't have to be followed in terms of the application and the waiting period. But you are going to see some changes to the historic structures provisions of the code, so we've got quite a bit of work that we need to do as a result of this change in the code. Churches, synagogues, and other places of worship are, under general law, no longer have to pay fees. As I read this would include zoning fees, building inspection fees. I have not gone back to look to see if there is anything specific. There wasn't in the actual House bill that adopted this, except for fire prevention inspection fees, which can still be charged to those entities.
Can we step back to that one for a moment? So it's not nonprofits, it's places of worship.
That's right.
How is a place of worship defined?
That's a good question, and it's one that periodically there are problems with. Is a Christian school a place of worship? Those are the types of questions that are raised, and it's not contained, the definition is not contained in this particular bill. So we're going to have some issues moving forward determining whether or not it's going to be applicable to any given person who comes in for a permit or a zoning change.
That seems like it has some constitutional implications, but I guess we'll find out.
House Bill 1277 permits localities to establish a civil penalty of up to $2,500 for individuals who are doing business that falsely claim that they have a valid contractor's license. This is permissive. This is not required. It's a consumer protection measure. If council wanted to do it, we could certainly add it to that section of the state code. We would be ultimately responsible to enforce it. That would be somewhat difficult, but we could probably do it if council wanted to move forward with it. There was a change to the arts district enabling legislation. Now city councils or counties can adopt more than one arts district if they so choose. There's no requirement that arts districts be contiguous to one another, so if council wanted to adopt a second one, they certainly could at this point. There was a change in zoning. Under previous law, localities that had a population of less than $130,000 had to provide for urban development areas in their comprehensive plans. That was mandatory. These are now optional as opposed to being mandatory. We have any number of districts that would qualify as urban development areas in the city. This is just informational. This is a little tricky. Reed and I had a fairly extensive conversation about this today. Localities are no longer allowed to prohibit or impose a total ban on departures and landings of non-commercial helicopters for personal use. But if there are repetitive landings and departures on the same parcel, then a special exception or an SUP, the council can require that someone obtain a special exception or an SUP. I think this is resulting from some disagreement that a property owner had with a board of supervisors in a jurisdiction in our area, one that we're going to have to deal with. And I think the way that we're going to deal with this is just to add a special exception or an SUP generally and see how it goes from there. It's kind of a strange piece of legislation, but we are going to have to amend the city code so we don't have a total ban on private use of helicopters in the city. The state code has been amended to require a new procedure for permitting oversized and overweight loads on state roads. Previously, the city manager was the only person who had the authority to allow oversized or overweight loads in the city. That is no longer the case. In order for the city manager to continue to have that authority, we need to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Transportation. There are specific provisions in the code that have to be in that memorandum of understanding. Most of them are what one would expect, except that what one provision that has to be in there is that the commissioner of the Department of Transportation can issue these as well as the city manager. So this may not be something that stays local any longer, and in fact won't necessarily be at this point. But in order to continue for the city manager to approve these, we will have to enter into an agreement. All motor vehicles, or all vehicles and trailers, not just motor vehicles, are now subject to the immobilization provisions in the state code when there are outstanding parking violations. So if someone stays illegally parked for a period of time and they're towed, it doesn't matter if it's a motor vehicle or a trailer or some other type of vehicle, they can be towed. Both the House and the Senate introduced and passed legislation to limit the locality's ability to reduce the number of taxicab certificates that are issued to a particular taxicab operator. So while localities continue to have the ability to set the overall number, jurisdictions, once those are granted, can't take them away unless they're not used or there's a for-cause situation, and the state code specifically says that decreased demand could be considered for cause, so we're going to need to amend the taxicab ordinance in order to accommodate that change. There's also a new procedure for dangerous dogs that are registered on the Dangerous Dog Registry. Updates, that information being added to the registry now is supposed to be handled by local animal control as opposed to being handled by the state veterinarian's office. The registration fee is increasing from $50 to $150 to initially register a dangerous dog, and then it's an $85 payment every year thereafter until the dog passes away. And then the city is required to pay to the state $90 per dangerous dog that it registers on the registry, and then $25 a year for each dog in the jurisdiction after that first year. So they're allowing a larger fee to accommodate. We have a shared animal control officer with James City County, so this is going to require that James City County and the city work together to determine how this is going to functionally operate. But they're shifting the burden to update the registry from the state to the local jurisdictions.
Is a dangerous dog a dog that's previously attacked somebody or been involved in an incident?
Yes.
Okay.
There's also a new process for the collection of delinquent water service fees. The reason for this legislation was property owners who rent their properties, who have liens filed against their properties as a result of tenants' non-payment of water bills, were trying to obtain some relief from the General Assembly for that. So the process would work something like this. If a tenant is going to put the water service in their name, then either the city can require the owner to give their approval for that, or the city can collect up to a 5-month deposit. And if it's not paid, the tools that the city can use is to attempt a debt set-off collection program, terminating the water service for 60 days of non-payment and providing written notice of at least 30 days prior to filing any lien. In order to only put the water in the tenant's name, council is going to need to approve a resolution that authorizes service to tenants as opposed to property owners. Most of the time, the water problems are resolved by shutting the water off, and so my recommendation to council is going to be that they adopt such a resolution to give staff the most flexibility for dealing with these. However, without the owner's written consent for the water to be put in the tenant's name, the city can no longer file a lien against the real property belonging to the owner of the property. So that will no longer be a mechanism for obtaining these funds. House Bill 1020 extends the number of calendar days from 10 to 15 that a precious metal dealer has to hang on to the merchandise that they purchase. And that clock begins to run when they give law enforcement the receipt of the sale, which has to happen 24 hours after the sale. So it's still a fairly quick process. I have not gone into any detail in the slide regarding stormwater provisions, but I did want to make council aware that stormwater management in the Commonwealth of Virginia is completely being altered, and it is a 38-page bill. It is extremely extensive. Our Public Works Department is already going through training. They're in communication with the state. The state is supposed to develop a model ordinance to assist localities in rewriting the provisions of our stormwater management ordinance. These are not required to be implemented until July 1st, 2013, so we have some time. We don't have a model ordinance yet from the state. I just wanted council to be aware that this is an extremely extensive change in the state law, and it's going to take a long time to work through, and that Public Works has already got a pretty good handle on this. Having talked to the city engineer, I feel pretty comfortable with where we are in this process, but council will certainly see a fairly extensive change in the city code as a result.
Without going too deeply into any details, are there particular major implications on the city, for the city?
The biggest one from my perspective is that there are parts of permitting processes that the city is going to end up taking over from the state, and my suggestion is that you ask Dan Clayton more about that, because he's certainly in a position to be able to detail those. I'm not sure we know the full implication of this yet, but it's certainly quite extensive.
Just add to that, the state's going to operate its program by taking a certain percentage of the fees collected locally for stormwater permitting. And they say, if you don't collect the fees, you still have to come up with the money for us as if you had collected the fees. So we expect that's going to be part of this. And because more and more the General Assembly is requiring these environmental departments to collect fees for their operations themselves rather than receive them from general funds of the Commonwealth.
Our fee structure, how does our fee structure treat stormwater now?
Well, essentially, there's not a separate
fee,
and so
So we'll have to create one?
we'll either have to create one, or we're going to have to pay from our general funds for what the state would have received if we had one. And there's a certain formula for how much the minimum amount they can receive is.
And this is to help fund the operation of the Department of Environmental Quality?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Back to support for the Commonwealth.
Once again, the General Assembly has continued the prohibition on annexation through the 2012 to 2014 biennium. And finally, for the slides, while it sounds like a really good thing, House Bill 1295 eliminates a number of mandates that the state imposes on various entities, state political subdivisions and localities, and of a very extensive bill, the two that are really going to impact us at all is, and not significantly, are the disposal of property can now be made without offering the property to the volunteer fire department before it's sold at public auction, and it increases the ceiling for professional service contracts without competitive negotiation from $50,000 to $60,000. There's also no longer a requirement that urban development area details be provided to the Commonwealth, but out of a very extensive bill, that seems to be about all that we can really take away from it. So that's all I have in terms of slides. I did want to update council on one other thing. In the legislative agenda, there was one provision regarding eminent domain. I did want to report that the General Assembly did, for the second year, adopt and move forward to a referendum in November, the provisions that significantly limit eminent domain for jurisdictions and political subdivisions. I know we had talked about this during the meeting with our legislators. They have adopted House Bill 5, and they have adopted a number of other pieces of legislation, House Bill 1035, which provides some definitions, but that will be on the ballot for referendum to determine whether or not it will be added to the Virginia Constitution in November. And to the extent that I haven't worn you out, I'm happy to answer any questions that I can. I do want to let you know that the legislative report for departments has been sent out. Every department has specific information for that department. The whole document, which is about a 2-inch binder, is available in the city attorney's office, or if council members would like to see it, we would be happy to forward it to you by email, but it is a very extensive document. This was a full session of the General Assembly, and so they were very, very busy this year, and there are a lot of things that departments need to know, and this certainly isn't the only thing that impacts jurisdictions, but I just wanted to highlight some things for council.
Thank you, Chris, I think. I think we will be seeing changes to our ordinances coming periodically from you to deal with these.
I thought it would be better if we did not do this and ordinance adoption on the same day, and so I asked the city manager to defer that to start in August, and he was kind enough to do that. We are certainly ready to go with the ordinances that need to be adopted sooner rather than later. There's nothing that can't wait until August, but that process will start in August for city council members in September. And we'll start with those ordinances next month.
Okay. So we should see a steady stream.
You will see several months of ordinances.
Job security.
Yes. That's great. Questions?
I have two questions. The eminent domain referendum, that will impact the state as much or more than the localities? Because I'm thinking, we don't use it, or we haven't used it in the city, have we?
It has the potential to really affect VDOT because...
That's what I was saying, the construction of highways. They've got to take property all the time.
The definitions, I think, are more helpful than not having them, because when we looked at this issue back in January, there were no definitions at all. it's not clear to me how helpful those definitions are going to be. I think it's one of those situations where we really have to see it, but it does have the potential to be more expensive for everyone who has the ability to enforce any kind of eminent domain over private property.
Okay. And could you possibly go back to the one, it was very early on, maybe 3, about wetlands and property tax or assessments? What where I get lost here is, and I'm sure it's all somewhere back in the supporting legislation, is most times wetlands increase the value of a piece of property. If you're on a body of water and a portion of your property is considered wetlands, being on the body of water makes your property more valuable.
Well, it depends on what kind of wetlands it is, I think, and not to give up too much personal information, but we have wetlands on the property that my husband and I own, and it's a marsh, but it's still considered a perennial stream. It's not really adding any value, and we have no ability to use it. So in those instances, I don't know that it wouldn't decrease it, but it's whether it increases or it decreases is not what this bill provides. It just simply says that the tax assessor can go in and assess the wetlands differently from the remainder of the property.
So they're not excluded from the acreage?
No.
They're just somehow
assessed differently.
So does the same thing apply for Chesapeake Bay preservation areas where?
If it's a wetlands, it's not that specific, it just says wetlands.
Okay. So if there's an area that's got a certain slope and you can't build on it because you're in the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area, that's not?
I don't think so. It specifically says wetlands, and so it does not include everything that could be encompassed by the Chesapeake Bay regulations.
So if somebody has a fishing pond, that could be wetlands?
Potentially.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Doug? Precious metal dealers, is there some relevance there? I mean, what am I missing?
Well, right now, if you want to come into the city and purchase precious metals, you have to obtain a license. And as part of that license, you have to report your receipts to the police department within 24 hours. And you cannot sell what you have purchased until that 10-day period, now 15-day period, has gone by. And we do have precious metal dealers who come into the city periodically and do this. So it's just simply another consumer protection provision that specifically pertains to our regulations.
Yeah, I think I understand better. You see them on the commercials on TV, we're buying gold now, okay.
But what about the cash for gold parties that people have? They invite people into their home, and
That's a good question, and I don't know if those fall under the statute or not. My expectation is that they would, and then the person purchasing the gold would be a business, and they would have to obtain a license in order to run that business, whether or not they're doing it in a commercial setting or residential setting.
Right. Okay.
I have another question about the eminent domain thing. When we were at VML, they talked about this eminent domain thing, and it wasn't just going and taking a piece of property for a school or a road or something. It was if you are doing repair work, the water main breaks in the street in front of Doug's place, then that owner can sue us because he's lost property because we're repairing the water main? Is that?
That is the concern that VML has. There is a provision in the accompanying legislation that will not take effect unless the referendum is in favor of this change to the Constitution. That specifically excludes temporary loss and explicitly says that it's only for takings pertaining to eminent domain. I'm not sure that the language that they've added, and I can read it to you.
That's okay.
I mean, it's a half a sentence. Nothing in this section is intended to provide for compensation for inverse condemnation claims for temporary interference with or interruption of a business. So that's the language that the General Assembly added to try to deal with that concern for
Because
VML.
that was what VML was worried about, yeah. Okay.
Could you imagine what they would consider the construction on Ironbound Road?
Just
Is that temporary?
9 months. Okay, thank you.
I had a question about the one dealing with business license or property taxes, and Is that something totally new? Is that something that's, I don't remember anything about.
It is new and it's not new. We have done this with personal property tax. We have not done this with real property taxes. It is something that would be a helpful tool to the Commissioner of Revenue to make it very clear that this is one option for having someone come in and pay their business license. But the language itself is new in the code.
Was there one dealing with property tax?
Yeah, it was, I think
I can't remember.
Deferment for.
Let me get back to my, hang on just a second.
Yeah. Bless you.
I'll talk to you later about it, but it seemed to me there was something about if you paid your taxes early, there was
Yes.
a rebate possible, and that's not something we've done.
It is not something that we have done. It is something that council can now do.
Okay, but
And Phil, Sarah, and I had a conversation about this particular provision. It would have to be a rebate that dealt with, or a discount that dealt with from the date of the assessment to the date that the taxes were due. Council has some flexibility in there to determine if that's something that it wanted to do, but this is new to the state code.
and that could be for commercial or residential?
It does not specify residential or
so,
commercial.
Okay. I mean, that could get quite complicated.
It could get very complicated, but it is something that we could look at if
Yeah,
council
okay.
wanted us to look at it.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Chris at this point? Thank you. I think we'll be seeing a steady stream of things from you over the next few months. Thanks. Our next order of business is unfinished business. I don't believe we have any. Is that correct?
I have one, and I don't know if it
Okay.
fits into this or not. In our prior conversations with the school administration and the school board, at least I'd requested that we get some report on a comparison between the all and the coaches' success, and I know there's been a report to the school board on the success of coaches. Could we, if we haven't already, could we talk to the superintendent?
We have, and it's tentatively scheduled for September. Will probably be Dave Gaston will come and give that report to us.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Any new business? That brings us to our final agenda item for the day, which is open forum. That's the time when anybody wishes to address council on any matter may do so. If you'd like to, please come forward, state your name and address. Yep, please.
Thank you, Mayor Holloman and the council members. My name is Jamani Williams. My address is 2401 Notion Avenue, Brooklyn, New York. I didn't intend to speak. I had no idea that my office contacted you guys. I guess they saw it on my calendar and decided to let you know I was here. I appreciate that. But since they did, I enjoyed coming here and seeing how things are done over here. It's pretty similar to how we do it. We're a little bigger in New York City, so we discuss some things just a little on a larger in scale, but pretty much the same things. The one thing I want to talk about, which luckily seems not to be a problem down here in Williamsburg, is the gun violence that goes on in New York City, and that's a big issue for me. My district, the 45th district, is Flatbush, East Flatbush, Midwood, and Canarsie. About 150,000 people, pretty eclectic. We go from $1 million Victorian homes to people who are getting public assistance, from Orthodox Jews to new immigrants from the Caribbean. So we have a pretty large group. But within that, we do have some significant gun violence in the city. And a lot of the mayor of the city of New York, Mayor Bloomberg, is doing a lot of good things nationally, I believe, to curb this. Locally, not so well. But on the national level. Unfortunately, and it's more of a state issue, but Virginia and North Carolina, we just get a lot of guns from those states that end up in New York City and end up, unfortunately, harming and killing many of the residents who live there. Most recently, July 4th weekend, we had about 77 shootings. Just a few weeks ago, a stray bullet hit a young 4-year-old. Nothing hurts a soul more than a 4-year-old sized casket. It's pretty bad. So I just want to put a little plug, whatever Williamsburg can do in the largest state issue, and helping curb some of the guns that are just getting through loopholes and getting to New York City. We'll be grateful for not only people in my district, but New York City as a whole. So thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Seeing no further comments, I think I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Oh, second.
Motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Scott?
Ms. Newton.
Aye.
Mr. Vaughn.
Aye.
Mayor Farland.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Fryland.
Aye.